Hi, friends. You are listening to the EntreEd Talk podcast, where we feature amazing educators and entrepreneurs showcasing how you can bring entrepreneurship into the classroom. We believe entrepreneurship is for everyone. I am your host, Toy Hirschman, and I am so glad you chose to join me on this journey. Let's go. All right. Welcome back, friends, to another exciting episode of the EntreEd Talk podcast. Here with me is Alexandra Shapiro. Alexandra is a criminal defense lawyer and one of the leading appellate lawyers in the United States. She was one of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg's first clerks on the Supreme Court, served as a federal prosecutor in Manhattan, and later founded an elite litigation boutique firm that handles many high-profile cases. In early 2021, Alexandra embarked on a new journey, fiction writing. She wanted to raise awareness about problems with the criminal justice system and how sometimes even innocent people can get unfairly prosecuted in the United States. The book is a legal thriller and has the working title of Presumed Guilty, and she's expected to publish this December. So I am so excited to learn all about this, her entrepreneurial journey, her book, and everything. Alexandra is a native New Yorker and has 3 kids, lives in Manhattan with her husband, who's also a criminal defense lawyer. I'm not going to mess with you guys ever. and is an avid photographer as well. I don't know how you do all of that stuff, but Alexandra, welcome so much. We're so excited to have you today.
Thanks so much for having me.
This is really cool. I don't know that we've ever had someone with your background on the show before. And this is so cool because we love to feature really interesting people, but we also love to feature people who are also entrepreneurs that have become entrepreneurs in not one of the spaces that you normally hear about. So you've got all kinds of stuff going on. But before we dive into that, can you give our audience a little bit more of your background, how you got to where you are today and your own entrepreneurial journey in the field of law and with your book?
Sure. So I graduated from law school in the early 90s. And at the beginning of my career, I was a law clerk for 1 year for a federal appellate judge in Washington, D.C. named Stephen Williams. And after that, clerk for Justice Ginsburg in her first year on the court. And then I became a federal prosecutor in the Southern District of New York, which is the federal prosecutor's office in Manhattan. And, while I was there, I tried a lot of criminal cases. I did federal criminal investigations and as well as appeals. And then I went into private practice at a big international law firm here in New York called Latham and Watkins. And I was there practicing for about a little less than 10 years. And then I founded my own firm in 2009. So I did that with, at the time, 3 other lawyers. And, we've grown over the years. We fairly quickly grew to about 10. And then we've been sort of roughly 9 to 12 lawyers at different times since then. But it's been a great experience to be running my own small firm. We do a lot of interesting work, not only white collar criminal defense, which is sort of my bread and butter, but different kinds of appeals, many different type of subject matters, both criminal and civil. And I have one partner who specializes in media and entertainment law, does a lot of copyright and trademark work for music companies, entertainment companies, artists. And one of my other newer partners, who actually is my husband, who joined our firm a couple of years ago, he does a lot of trial work of various different types, both criminal and civil.
Wow. So what made you decide to strike out on your own after having an astounding career already before you did that? Because that's a little, that's that risky entrepreneurship proposition, right?
Yeah, no, it was definitely risky. And I had spent the bulk of my career like in these large institutions, first the federal government, and then this very large law firm that at the time had, I think, somewhere between around 2,000 lawyers, I think, when I left. It's even bigger now, and offices all over the world. And part of it was that I I had always kind of secretly thought maybe it would be cool to start my own firm. I really wanted more flexibility to be able to take on the kinds of cases that I found most interesting without the kind of constraints that big institutions really need to have in terms of, um, both large law firms tend to charge really high rates, and they're not as, at least my firm, but many large firms are just not that flexible. If you want to give a substantial discount to someone who can't afford those rates, but has a really interesting case or something like that. And then also there are many conflicts of interest that are built into working at a large law firm like that, because they represent so many different institutions, banks, public companies, accounting firms. And I had found over the years that although I was able to work on a lot of interesting matters, that sometimes I had to turn down, particularly in the criminal area, some interesting representations of individuals who, the firm had some conflict with. So I thought it was, and I did it at the right around the height of the financial crisis, which was its own kind of challenge. And I think I was lucky in the sense that as someone who's a litigator, as opposed to like a business lawyer, it's easier to still stay busy and have a lot of work during a financial downturn, because people don't stop suing each other. The government doesn't stop prosecuting people for crimes. So the fact that there aren't as many deals or something, it just wasn't going to impact what we were trying to do, since we don't do that kind of work. We're only involved in litigation.
Wow. So that sounds exciting. And I'm being honest, I don't know a whole lot about the legal process and the whole industry, but it's fascinating to me. And thank goodness I don't know. I never.
Right, exactly. Well, it's funny that you said that, because I always feel like, particularly in my line of work where I do a lot of white collar defense or appeals, when someone's lost a case, is, I think the clients certainly wish they weren't having to hire me. So I think most people don't want to have to deal with lawyers, and I totally understand that.
I think it's really exciting. You watch the shows and read books and things, and you're like, oh, that looks so exciting, but I don't understand. So speaking of books, so you are writing a book, which is really cool. And it's highlighting, I'm not going to say much, but I'll let you highlight what it's about, but it's talking about some of the issues that happen in the legal field. And I think that that's really important, but it's also fiction. So I'd love for you to just kind of describe what it's about and what you're doing with it and what you plan to do with it.
Sure. So over the years, particularly now, I've now been doing criminal defense work for around 20 years. Although I think our criminal justice system is certainly one of the best in the world, there are a number of cases that I've personally handled in which, I felt something unfair or wrong happened to a client accused of a crime. Sometimes justice ultimately prevails. The client is accused of a crime wrongly. They lose the trial, but they win the appeal. Or maybe if they're lucky, they get acquitted at trial. But even in those circumstances, their lives are destroyed in so many ways. And there also are the rare cases as well where the system can fail, regardless of the resources the client has. And, they may have good lawyers, but could still end up going to prison. And I wanted to sort of raise attention to that issue. And at the same time, I'd always kind of secretly harbored the idea of writing fiction. And I was originally actually thinking about writing a nonfiction book about one of my cases, but it's a fairly complicated financial transaction. A lot of my white collar works involves these different kinds of transactions. And I was afraid that it just wouldn't appeal to a mass audience, and that it'd be harder to get the message across. And Eric Koester, the professor at the Book Creator Institute, where you and I met, when I had my first call with him and I was telling him about this, he said, well, why don't you write a novel? And I thought, well, that's a great idea, especially because I'd always wanted to try that. It was a little intimidating, to turn my hand to fiction. and challenging, but I thought it made sense, and it was a better way to try to create a simplified story that would get the message across and hopefully be, entertaining and interesting to a wide variety of readers. So that's how I ended up on this journey. And I think the fact that we were undergoing a pandemic probably helped, just because I think a lot of people were trying new things during the pandemic. And so that's how it came about.
Awesome. Well, could you tell us a little bit about what's the story about?
Yeah. So the lead character is the protagonist is a woman named Emma Simpson, who is a hedge fund manager at a hedge fund in New York. And what happens in the story is that there's some prosecutors in the Southern District of New York they're investigating insider trading, and they are trying to see if they can make a case that her fund is involved in insider trading. And they're not finding the evidence, but they're very aggressive, and they want to bring a case, and they ultimately end up prosecuting her for an email she wrote during the investigation, which they say was obstruction of justice. Basically, it was an email, very short email, happened in the course of a long, busy day where she was doing a lot of other things. It basically endorses a colleague's recommendation to people in her office that they follow what's called a document retention policy, which most companies have. It basically says, you have to keep certain documents for a particular period of time, but you should throw out other things. And it's very routine and standard, but she gets prosecuted and goes to trial for obstruction of justice for sending that email. And she's about 45 years old. She also lives in upstate New York and has a long commute every day because she wanted to move her family to this farm in upstate New York so that they could have a better kind of experience. Her kids could have a better experience growing up and things like that. And so it tells the story of the investigation and the trial. And I probably shouldn't give away any more than that, but
no spoilers.
That's the basic gist of it.
That's awesome. I love how you leveraged your background and things you've experienced I think writing fiction, it does seem very intimidating, but I think that's really cool that you're able to try that. And that would definitely be out of my comfort zone as well. And it's just, it's neat to be able to take some of those components of your background and put them into your creation. So that's awesome. What do you see happening? So the book gets published and you're still practicing law. So what do you see happening after that in the future? What's kind of coming down the road, do you think? Or what would you like to have happen?
Well, I'm hoping that once it's published that I can get opportunities to do book talks and book signings and things like other podcasts, and that will around the country, hopefully, that will help me raise awareness about some of these issues and kind of encourage readers and others in the community to really think about and have dialogue about questions like, how can we make the criminal justice system fairer? What reforms can help ensure that prosecutors investigate with an open mind and don't rush to judgment? And how can we make sure that people take in the system, including jurors who are so critical and are composed of, ordinary lay people who typically don't encounter the criminal justice system. How can we get them to take the presumption of innocence seriously? And I think it's totally understandable, but I believe that a lot of jurors, come into most cases, and I'm sure most jurors try to be impartial and they try to put this out of their head, but they probably give the prosecution the benefit of the doubt. And they probably assume that, hey, if a case was brought, the person probably did it. And that may be true in the majority of cases, but I just want to raise awareness about this in part also so that when people are called to jury service, they really put the prosecution to their burden of proof and really try to, as best they can, think about the presumption of innocence and make sure that before they reach a verdict that they've been as fair as they can be. So
Wow. I love that. I love that message. And I love that that's what you're trying to do with the book. That's something that's definitely needed, but you're right. I'm just sitting, to be honest, I'm sitting here thinking if I was on jury duty, there probably would be something in my brain like, well, why am I even here? If this person, if, if there's not a little bit of truth in, then that makes sense, even though, that's not always the case. That's really cool. So you are doing all kinds of things. And I guess, I don't know if the pandemic helped you. It didn't give me any extra time back. It made me it's, being stuck in my house and being the unpaid principal of my own kids' homeschool academy was a little bit challenging in addition to all the other things. So how do you juggle it all? Do you have a secret for, and you also have this great art hobby too, and full-time job, and you're writing a book and you have 3 children, and that's kind of amazing.
Well, thanks. I don't have any great secret except I think I'm lucky at this point, and it's a little easier at this point because my kids have gotten older. So I don't think I could have done, written a book while doing my job when my kids were younger, but one of them just graduated from college, another one's in college, and then we have one at home who's in high school. So it's a little bit easier because the one who's home, he just turned 17, he's pretty independent. So I don't have to spend as much time, just kind of with all the like during the pandemic, for instance, since my son was in 10th grade, it wasn't like a lot of people I talked to, and maybe you're one of them, who had younger children and they really had to, as you said, kind of homeschool them during this remote schooling. So I think that helps a lot to free up a little more time. But in all honesty, I basically wrote the book at nights and on weekends. And so it's always hard to manage the time. And I really do enjoy taking pictures. And I go in kind of spurts, and especially if I'm lucky enough, and this wasn't the case, obviously, during a lot of the pandemic, but to be able to travel on a vacation, I take a lot of pictures, or, even on the weekends and things like that. And I did a little bit of that in the pandemic, but I've been able to do more recently as things have opened up and there's been more time to get out of the house, basically.
It's only so many ways you can take pictures out your window.
Yeah, no, exactly. That's totally true. And you can find interesting, I don't know, even just like sometimes mundane objects. Like I remember my son, who I mentioned, he took a photography class, and one of the assignments was to take like 10 pictures of mundane objects. So, we went around the house coming up with ideas of like little things he could take pictures of. And a couple of them, it was all him, not me, but they were pretty interesting. So, there's always interesting ways you can make art out of almost anything, I think.
Yeah. It took me a really long time to learn about that concept and the idea of being creative. And, I waited way too long, but I still have time, I hope.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
To be creative like that and to do different things. So we have one of the things that we talk to our educators and our friends about as EntreEd, we go out and we talk to students and teachers. We are 100% about being entrepreneurial, whether you work for a company and you just have that mindset, or whether you go out and do something on your own, or whether you do a little bit of both. But I always like to talk about the fact that being an entrepreneur is super cool, and it's really amazing, the benefits you can get out of it, but it's also really hard. And so you talked about this idea that, you wanted to do this. This was a passion of yours to write this book, but you've got this whole pile of other things that you have to take care of. And so it was at night. And I think that a lot of people that start a business and they want to be safe, and they want to make sure that they're taking risk, but it's an educated risk. They have to put this extra time in, and they have to do things that they might not always want to do.
Right.
Like be a zombie in the middle of the night, which is what I've had to do too. But I think that's something we like to drive home. It's so worth it. but it does take a lot. It does take a lot of grit and perseverance to do all of those things.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, and I think, you gotta, I think it can be challenging, and you're going to have your ups and downs. You're going to fail at some things, but if you have the determination to keep going, it's going to be incredibly rewarding, because it's going to be something, whatever it is that, you've built and you've followed your passion. And so hopefully, if it's a success, it's going to be something that you're going to be really proud of. And just on a day-to-day basis, you're going to be doing work that you enjoy doing. And I think that's really key to being, a happy person.
Yeah, I think that's very inspiring. We have we have a lot of teachers and other types of educators, not just K-12 teachers. We have college and university level folks and all kinds of other people that are teaching in different capacities.
Mm-hmm.
That listen to the podcast. And so what advice might you give to any of those folks who want to be able to help inspire their students to become entrepreneurial in nature? And then also the second part of that is, what might you give a young person who's like, I'm really into law, and now I'm listening to this podcast and I'm thinking, oh, that's cool. I could have my own firm and I could write a book, and some of those types of things.
Yeah. So I'll take the last one first, because it's a little bit easier, I guess. I would say I couldn't have done what I did without developing experience first as a lawyer and in different aspects of law. So I worked for the government for a while. I worked for a large private law firm for a while. I think the experience I gained, both in terms of developing my skills as a lawyer, and then in the private law firm, learning a lot about the business of law, which is really important to understand if you want to start a law firm. Those were critical experiences that gave me the ability to really develop a successful law firm. Now, there are people who, hang out their shingle right after law school, and, kudos to them. I don't think I would have built the practice that I have today if I had tried something like that, because I learned so much, getting the legal experience, but also working with so many great lawyers at these other institutions who really taught me a lot about, how to be a great lawyer, and then many other facets of it, like, how to deal with clients and manage the many other challenges of being a lawyer in private practice. So I would recommend, if someone's interested in doing this, that they get some experience first, whether it be, in a government job, in a public interest job, or at another law firm, and develop their legal skills a bit in whatever area they want to practice in. And then, and also the other thing is, you build a network when you have these other jobs, and it's tremendously helpful to have a network of other professionals who you've worked with, who think well of you, because that's where you get your referrals. So that would be my recommendation to people thinking about becoming lawyers and having their own firms. And with regard to the teachers, I guess I would definitely, there are a bunch of things, that I can think of. One thing is to just, because it depends on the field and everything, but I think that people should be encouraged to kind of figure out what they want to do, and then, kind of research it, and figure out, what's your business plan? Like, how are you going to do this? Start thinking about who might be able to help you get started, who might be a potential client. Those are just a few things that come to mind.
I love that you said that about networks, because that's a big deal. And probably more so in your field than some others, but it's a big deal across the board. We had a guest on a little bit ago, Stephanie Krause, and she wrote a book about some of the competencies and things that you need to bring to young people. And part of that is showing them the power of developing a network. And, so you have people that will you've developed this network, you'll have people that uplift you. So when you do strike out on your own and you do start, in your case, your law firm, you have people who are willing to refer to you and people who are willing to introduce you, and how important that is to develop. It's a tough skill these days.
No, it definitely is. And I think, I mean, I myself, when I was younger, was in some ways a very shy person. And I think it takes a little bit of experience. Some people are much more naturally extroverted than I am, but I think it's important to encourage young people in particular to just, not be shy about reaching out and introducing themselves to people. You'd be surprised how often people are interested in making new acquaintances and kind of helping you once they learn about your project. So you should try not to be shy about that. And then, one introduction can often lead to another one, and so on. And, I think it takes some practice to get comfortable doing that, but it will be very rewarding. And one nice thing about, for young people that didn't really exist when I was much younger, is all the technology. So, this social media and how you can kind of not only make connections, but keep in touch with people much more easily. People move all over, but if they're on your Instagram or whatever it is, it's just, I think, my kids on their social media accounts, they have so many friends, and I know that they're not close friends with all these people, but they're sort of already building their network that way. And I think it's, I mean, the technology is great for that.
As long as they're using it for good, not evil.
Oh yeah, no, exactly. I mean, certainly not, hopefully they're not like just connecting with strangers or anything like that. But, I really was more thinking about, for instance, my two younger kids went to a different school for high school than before. They went to one school through 8th grade, but they also went to summer camp. And so they have like sort of their friend group from the middle school, as well as their camp friends and their high school friends. And then, it's sort of those different networks. That's really what I was talking about.
No, I knew what you meant. I just, we talk a lot about to students about when your social media can be really great, and it can be really, really detrimental. And you have to be cautious of, when you're building that network, you make sure you have a kind of a blueprint or plan of what kind of network you want. And that kind of falls back on, your ethics and morals and what you plan on doing in the future. And so that's a tricky, I'm navigating that with my children currently.
Yeah, no, that's a big issue. And then the other thing too is, and we haven't had any issues in our family with this, but, other kids at school sometimes do, is trying to teach younger people the importance of privacy and boundaries, and figuring out, that they need to be careful about what they put in a public social media post, as opposed to, what they're talking to their friends on the phone about, or whatever, or what's a private conversation, and not, making everything public, which I think is something that a lot of kids these days blur the boundaries of, because of the nature of the technology and the society we live in. And I think it can be counterproductive in a whole host of different ways.
Yeah, so. I know. And you might've even dealt with some of this in your practice, but this, these kids right now, like my kids, your kids, they were born on social media.
Yeah.
Like they're like, and I'm guilty of this too. And I read an article a little bit ago and I was like, oh no, I did it too. Where, they've been on, their face has been on social media since they were pretty much born.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's, I feel like I've kind of contributed to that blurring of the boundaries, because, 20 years from now, somebody could go back and hopefully there's nothing, nothing
right.
bad, but, you could do something stupid when you're
sure
a young kid, and then it could haunt you forever and destroy, like you mentioned before, about people who, even if they're innocent, they go through this process and it destroys their entire reputation and probably drains their bank accounts and all of that stuff. And, that's a terrible thing. So it's scary, but I mean, it's good too. It's kind of a strange mixed bag.
Yep.
But anyway, well, Alexandra, I'm so excited about your book and that you decided to take this journey. And I'm excited about your law firm too. And just congratulations on on everything and your success. This is really amazing what you're doing.
Thanks so much. And really, thanks a lot for having me. This
And
was great.
I hope that the book blows up and has wild success, and then you get to share this message with the rest of the world. It's really cool. So before we go, where can people go to find out more about you, your law firm, your book, and all the cool stuff that you're doing? And, only share what you're willing to share.
Sure. No, probably the best way would be, so my law firm has a website. It's www.shapiroarato.com. And that has all the information about my practice, my colleagues and their practice and what we do. And then I recently initiated a personal website to promote the book, and that's www.alexandrashapiro.com. And it has some information about the book, and it also has links to pre-order, which will take you to the Indiegogo website where I'm doing the crowdfunding campaign.
Awesome. Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm so excited to have met you, and I just wish you all the luck in the world.
Thanks so much.
Awesome. Thanks for being on.
Okay.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.